The Bible. The Bible is a sacred text that has undergone centuries of interpretations and translations, resulting in the exclusion of certain books deemed the Apocryphal or Gnostic. Now, these missing books, thanks to the Council of Nicaea, have have been left out. However, they offer an insight into alternate perspectives and teachings that are not available in the traditional Bible. Now, joining us to demystify the Bible is our smart sister, Valerie Love KAISI. Welcome, KAISI. How are you?
Thank you so much for this opportunity to have this delicious conversation. It's going to be good.
Yeah, it's gonna be good. And before we jump right in, we know that when it comes to the Bible and the missing books of the Bible, some people see it as mysterious, some see it as controversial. Now, most people, they know what the Bible is, right? But they might not have heard about the Apocrypha. They may not have heard about the ancient texts. They may not have heard about the Council of Nicaea. They don't know about this stuff. And so we have an incredible woman today to help us decipher, for lack of better words, these mysterious, somewhat controversial texts, and tell us what they are and why they are relevant in understanding this amazing book known as the Bible. Valerie, take it away.
Wow, that's a big question, Faith. Wow.
I know. But trust me. And before we even start, I want to remind people why I've given Valerie such a loaded question, because her bio and her background, like all our shows, is in the description. And she's a brilliant woman with a wealth of knowledge. And she has done a lot of really good research into this topic and other topics. So I want to invite you all, before we even dive right in, so y'all don't think I'm being unfair to Valerie. She's equipped, trust me. Go into the description and look at her work and look at all the stuff she has going on and see what piques your interest and just go for it. So Valerie, you get the loaded questions. Take it away. Take it
I
wherever you
love
take
it.
it.
I love it. Oh my goodness, I love it. So we grew up with the Bible, and
Mhm.
I think I received my first Bible when I was 3 or 4 years old. Here's your Bible. Don't put it on the floor. Don't mark in your Bible. Take care of it. Read your Bible every day. With the usual set of instructions that a child being raised in a Christian experience might have.
Mhm.
And I didn't know what the book was. I read it like they said, yet I knew the book meant something. I
Mhm.
knew it was an important book, and not simply from the reverence that was around the book. It almost had an aura, the reverence around the book from the people who gave
Mhm.
me the book.
Mhm.
I knew somehow intuitively, even though I was little, this book means something.
Mhm.
And so what I discovered after I was in the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses for over 20, about 26 years, I left there when I had a dark night of the soul around 28, 29. I left there during my Saturn return. It was a very difficult period of time for me, very difficult period of time. And I was groping in the dark and I was looking for answers. And I knew that the cult that I had grown up in was not the answer. Now, I didn't know what was the answer. I knew what was not the answer. And so I said to myself, I've got to find the answer. And so I began reading and reading and reading, having no idea, Faith, where it would take me.
Mhm.
No idea, with no steering wheel. It was more of a hot air balloon ride. It did not have a specific destination.
A
like
hot air balloon with no destination.
Sometimes I feel like I'm just floating and wafting, like, where am I going? Right? And I asked myself that several times, yet I knew I was going somewhere. I knew I was on to something.
Mm-hmm.
So I began to read books outside of the Christian faith. For a while, I put the Bible in the Bibles. When I first left the cult, I locked up all the Bibles. I was like, I'm over it. I
Mm-hmm.
just want to live my life, have fun, wear mini skirts, hang out in clubs, do whatever I feel like doing. And that's it. Right? So I did that for a while. I call that my hedonism phase. And while it was a lot of fun, it was a lot of fun. Yeah, my hedonism phase, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we shall die. One of those kinds of things.
YOLO.
Right, right. Just live for the moment because all that stuff they told me in the religion, no. I was up to here with it. I'm over it. So I went and I did all the things they told me not to do. And then I saw, well, that's not it either. I sat down on my bed one day and I said, well, that wasn't it. So clearly, doing everything that people tell you to do is not it. And rebelling against everything people tell you to do is not it either. Okay, so let me find what is it. And so that's when I began to read, read, read books like Graham Hancock books, witchcraft books, books on the elements, Scott Cunningham. I read all kinds of books. I began to acquire other holy books because when I was in the church, and we didn't have a church, they call it a Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses. They didn't allow us to read things that were outside of the cult other than what you might have had to read for school. And even that was carefully curated by your mother, your parents. Or they didn't even encourage newspapers or things like that. They only wanted you to focus on reading what they put out, which was more of the brainwashing. So for me to go and read all of these books at 30 some years of age and to discover astrology, I thought I had been living in a cave for the first 3 decades of my life. I didn't even know what my sun sign was. I didn't even know I was a Libra. And so all of the searching, and I bought holy books from other faiths. I looked at the Zohar, and I studied Kabbalah, and I bought the Gnostic Gospels, and I started looking at the Apocrypha, the Bible with the Apocrypha, because all that was taboo. And I began also reading the teachings of Buddha. And as I read the teachings of Buddha, I said, wow, this sounds a lot like Jesus Christ. Like the only frame of reference I had was Christ. And when I read the teachings of Buddha, I said, well, either Jesus and Buddha is the same person, or these stories are, they're very similar. And so as I began to go deeper and deeper and deeper, I began to study about the early beginnings of the Christian faith. Like, how did we get from Jesus being baptized, or even before that, his birth, to what we have today in churches? So while I was in this exploration period, I'm still in my exploration period, I began to visit churches. I went to Catholic churches. I went to Lutheran churches. I went to every holy house that you can imagine. If it came on my radar, I went there. I even went to a synagogue one Saturday morning with the Jewish family, Jewish people. They welcomed me right on in. And I didn't understand what they were reading because they were reading books that it was in the original Hebrew and I couldn't read it, yet they shared it with me. They sang, they showed me what was going on. They welcomed me. And I know they must have been saying, where did this random lady come from? I'm sure, because I did not look like everybody else that was in that synagogue that day. Yet they were so warm and welcoming. Yeah, I was the odd person out. It was so warm and welcoming. And that's not every synagogue, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That was just the synagogue that I was in. And then I went to the mosque and I said, well, what are the Islamic people doing? And I dressed and did everything that they told me to do. I always prepare myself and be very respectful of people and their experiences and how they worship. And I'm very curious about that. I'm extremely inquisitive about how we connect with the divine and dimensions beyond this third dimensional plane. And so I went to the mosque and I was all dressed as they prescribed. And I was on the side with the women and the other side with the men. And I was there doing my prayers. I was doing everything the women did. And I had a profound experience of this full body prayer. So I went and I got a Quran as well. And so reading all these books, I always had the Bible kind of as home base.
Mm.
So I would go to, oh, you run around the first base and the second base, but you always want to come home. So the Bible was always the home base, the foundation. So after looking at all these different books, I also began to travel the world and study different cultures. So I lived in Mexico for over 3 years, and it was deep into Mayan culture. And I lived in the Yucatan Peninsula, and I went to visit ancient Mayan cities. And I saw Chichen Itza and Uxmal, and then I went over to Mexico City and I saw Teotihuacan, the Temple of the Sun and the Temple of the Moon. Oh, yes. I'm fascinated by these things. It was like I'm on a quest for what are our origins? What are humanity's origins? Where do we come from? This holy book is telling us something. Yet, because there was so much noise from the people who said, this is what the book is saying, it almost muted what the book is actually saying, which I found out are two very different things. What people are telling us the Bible is saying is different from what the Bible is actually saying. So, to give an answer to your powerful, potent question,
But you're equipped to handle.
I can do it. I can do it. Yes.
Go for it.
I'm going to go for it. I'm going to give it my best shot. That what I came to find out through all of my research is that the entire Bible, the text of the Bible that we have today, known as the 66 books of the Bible canon, different canon in Ethiopia, a different canon in the Catholic Church, right? What I came to discover is that this book is not talking about God at all. Now, that is it's a shocker. Now, I was shocked to find it out. And the deeper I dig, I see, oh, this book isn't talking about God. This book, here's what this book is about, the canon, and then I'll talk about the extraneous books to the canon that we also know were eliminated, suppressed somewhat because of the potent material and information that is in some of these books. Well, even the book of Revelation.
Potent it is.
Yes.
Potent it is. Take you. Yeah. Go on.
Oh my goodness. And so even the book of Revelation barely made it in. They were haggling back and forth for a while, and there were some who voted not to put the book of Revelation in.
Yep.
Yet it did barely make it in. Yet we have an Ethiopian Bible, much older, much more complete, even with pictures, which is really fascinating, beautiful. So here's what the Bible, the 66 books that we have, is about. The first part of the Bible, which is the Hebrew Bible, is about ancient alien contact. That is what the Old Testament is about. The New Testament is political. It is Rome's attempt to hijack and usurp the Christ teachings and form it into a religion and control people.
Say that again.
One of those is about God.
Say that again.
Yes.
Say that again. It is. Say
That's
it again.
Oh.
Just say what you've said again, because I know sometimes people hear what they want to hear, but you've said something very, very profound. To usurp.
It's a political document. The New Testament is a political document that the Romans used to usurp the teachings of Christ, bastardize them in an attempt to get control over all in the Holy Roman Empire. And the Holy Roman Empire still exists in the form of the Vatican, which I've been to a couple of times, with its own laws and police from Italy, even though it sits right there in the middle of Rome. It is not part of Rome. And if you walk to the Vatican when you're in Rome, which I've done a couple of times while I'm in Rome, I walk to the Vatican. It will tell you are crossing an international line. When you get to it's got it on Google Maps. You're crossing over international boundary into the Vatican City. And to this day, Vatican City controls the lives of 1 billion, 1.5 billion people. And it is believed that the Pope, I have respect for everyone, it is believed that the Pope is God's vicar on earth. And what I would say is that everyone, if he is God's vicar on earth, then everyone is God's vicar on earth. You are your own vicar on earth. So that's what the New Testament is about. And we have proof of that. We have several books. There's an incredible book that absolutely outlines it in great detail. And it's called Creating Christ. Yes, that's the name of it, Creating Christ. And it is all about, there's a teachings of Christ, and then how it got snatched, hijacked, or usurped, morphed into what it needed to be to control the population. And it continues in a form that is supposed to be about God, yet it's not. It's pretty shocking.
It is pretty shocking. But, when you have read the text as you have, these things come so natural to you as you're talking. It just flows because you've read all this text, made the comparison, and then you can see the text in real life, and that is the difference when you're speaking, it's different for somebody who is still on the Bible. So I think could you
It's
touch?
difficult.
It's
I
very
feel,
difficult.
yeah.
That's why I was like, can you just repeat it? Because the New Testament and the Old Testament, these are like two separate books with two different agendas. You said something so powerful. If the people catch it, it's two different agendas, two different books, and the Old Testament, you said a mouthful there.
Wow, people are they
I
really.
mean, and it's backed up by so many texts. And I'd like you to touch on the Gnostic texts because these Gnostics, I think they were extremely notorious, because they were all about agendas and politics. And you mentioned this. Well, not really the Gnostics. Let me say the Council of Nicaea. Those ones. Those are the ones who I think were making decisions based on politics and domination and control and taking out what suited whatever agenda. But I would like you to just talk a little bit about these Gnostic texts and in the Bible, the ancient literature, and why it's important for people to really know about these texts and the Apocrypha as well. What is the Apocrypha, and if you could touch on, of course, the Book of Enoch, which is my favorite book. Just take that where you want to take it because
Wow.
it's so
Hey,
broad.
you have to prepare for your questions because wow, wow. I needed to eat a steak first to get ready for you.
No, Valerie,
I
come on now. You
love
have
it.
25 books under your belt, right? And
Yeah,
counting.
yeah, you go right in for it. Okay,
Do
okay.
I?
I'm keeping up. Yeah,
When you mentioned the aliens, I was like, she's gonna have to talk about the Book of Enoch
that's right.
and the Gnostic text because the Book of Enoch touches on the Nephilim, the
Yeah.
mermaids. I mean, that is a book that I read like 5 times because I was like, what the
Oh,
hell is going on here?
oh.
So just take it where you want to take it, Valerie.
Okay, okay. So maybe first we'll touch on the Gnostics since you
Yeah, yeah,
mentioned
yeah.
them as well. It's a really good question. And so the Gnostics, it's sort of a term that we made up because those people would not have called themselves Gnostics. And scholars now are saying that the term Gnostic is a somewhat problematic because
Okay.
we kind of use it to blanket a whole groups of people, even though I think most of us kind of know Gnostic and what it means. They are more metaphysical. We also understand that these people are, they actually flipped. The Gnostic teaching is that in the Garden of Eden, the serpent was the helpful one and the God was the evil one. And they are correct. They are correct. It's the exact reverse.
It is.
That it's the exact reverse. And you know what's very fascinating? Nowhere in the Bible does it state that the serpent in the Garden of Eden was A, evil, or B, is Satan. Nowhere in the Bible does it state that. That's a later iteration. That's a much later thought. That, remember, a lot of these things that people believe in church, they were made up by humans, mostly men, because the women were doing their own goddess worship and things like that. Mostly men made these things up. They were bishops. They were what we call the church fathers, and we don't have church mothers, do we? We know about all these bishops. And the bishops were going back and forth, sending letters back and forth, bishops all over the Roman Empire, back and forth, tussling with questions. Well, was Jesus divine? Some thought he was, some thought he wasn't. Some said, well, maybe he was divine when he was born. Some others said, well, maybe he was divine when he was baptized. Others said, well, maybe he was human, and then when he raised up, he became divine at that point, and now he's divine. These things were not settled. So the Christian faith, or the doctrine that we know of as Christianity, was years in the making, and it happened long after Christ had already been killed, now, or martyred, as we would say. So the Gnostics said that the evil one in the Garden of Eden was the God who, it makes sense, did not want Adam and Eve to have knowledge, did not want Adam and Eve to have Gnosis. In the Gnostics, or the people who talked about Gnosis, they said that it's very important to have Gnosis of what? The light that is within you. And so that Gnosis, or that knowing, that knowledge, right? It's not like book knowledge, right? As we know, it's more of an inner knowing of the light that is in you, that resides in you, and that you have a divine spark. And what they said, what made the God of the Garden of Eden evil, is that he attempted to trap the divine spark in a human body, in clay, flesh and blood, and put this creation in a beautiful garden to make them think, to sort of fall asleep and go unconscious and not awaken to your true divine nature, which is a powerful message for everyone. Though many of them eschewed or scorned physical existence, because they viewed all physical existence as a prison, which in some ways it is. Even physics tells us that we are not seeing reality, that the universe is not locally real. 3 scientists won the Nobel Prize for proving that the universe doesn't exist. So things don't exist until we measure them, or until we observe them, and then they exist. And then when we're not measuring them, not looking at them, they don't exist. And so we're continually creating this. So what we know then, that this thing that we're in, this third dimensional plane of space and time, can't be real. It appears very real, yet it's not real. If we're making things up and then they're not there when we don't observe them, they have no permanence. They have no reality. They have no objective reality on their own. This is true of everything in the space-time continuum. So the Gnostics were correct in that the divine is trapped in flesh and blood and in a matrix, an unreal world, and doesn't know it. And our job is to have Gnosis and become aware that we are living in a prison, and to fan that spark, that divine spark, and don't make the prison real. Now they say that the serpent, and I'll show how this connects to the book of Enoch, Genesis, they said the serpent was the helper. The serpent was the liberator. Because the serpent came, and we do notice that the serpent represents wisdom, knowledge, healing, and most every transformation in almost every culture. Even doctors in our Western culture have the serpent, the caduceus, on their jacket, their healing jackets. A doctor's laboratory coat, or his coat, has that symbol on it. So the serpent is always seen as healing, helpful, and something that will transform you. And so the serpent speaking to Eve in the Garden of Eden, according to the story that we received in the Bible, was a liberator to say, you're not going to die if you eat from that tree. They don't want you to live forever. You're not going to die. And the being that the Bible calls the God, that's not God. And you need to free yourself. Now, how does that relate to the book of Enoch and to Genesis? Genesis tells us, Genesis 1, verse 1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Well, in the beginning, God, that word that has been translated God, that's not what the Bible originally said. The Bible originally said the Elohim. Well, who are the Elohim? The Elohim are the ancient star people that came from another planet and from other star systems and visited us hundreds of thousands of years ago, and just left about 4,048 years ago in 2024, surprisingly, when they had a great conflagration. They had like a Star Wars kind of conflagration where they detonated sort of like the equivalent to our nuclear warheads, because this civilization, also known as the Anunnaki, extremely advanced, far more advanced than us, very advanced in technology, also advanced in biology, and even mapping the genome, which we just mapped the human genome fairly recently. They were able to conduct genetic experiments. They were able to hybridize an existing bipedal hominid that was here on the planet. It was erect. It was a Homo erectus, and with their own DNA. So in essence, we are from the stars. The star people are our ancestors, and we have common ancestors. So we really need to stop having the black-white fights and the Chinese against American fights and all of the fights that we like to have just because we don't have anything better to do on planet Earth. We have lots to do on planet Earth to ascend our consciousness. We have our work cut out for us. So let's feed some hungry people. Let's have homes for people. Let's help.
We have a lot to do.
Yeah, we don't have anything else better to do with ourselves other than fight.
We have a lot to do. Yeah.
We have a lot to do on this planet. Plant some trees, right? Go be a beekeeper. Learn how to keep bees and help the bee population expand. There's plenty of things we could be doing, right? Helpful things. Lots of helpful things.
Affect us all.
Yes.
So even if you wanted to be selfish, just do it. It will help you as well.
That's right. It'll help you. You could be alone with yourself tending to the bees because you don't like other people. You don't want to. You don't like to be people because people be peopling, as they say. Well, just work with the bees, or just go on a farm and help the animals. Collect the eggs from the chickens or something. There are many constructive things we could be doing on this.
There are way too many for such a petty. It's so outdated to me, Valerie. That is so outdated. We're in the information age.
We're over that.
We know about genetics. We know about great-great-grandmother who was white, and now here you are showing up black. We know about great-great-grandmother who was black. You're here showing up white. We know enough. Blood types are all races, blue, all blood. I'm over it. Like you said, there are too many things.
Yes.
That you've said, really, yeah. And then you mentioned our ancestors. This is quite interesting, and it even without doing the research, we have all the blood types. And the blood tells a lot about a person, right? So.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating too about it is that when you look at we look at the Gnostic way of looking at it, we look at the biblical way of looking at it, and then if we go to the ancient Sumerian tablets and all of the oldest literature that is on this planet, literally the oldest, before pen, paper, before papyrus like they had in Egypt, before all of that were cuneiform tablets and clay tablets that they would fire and it could last forever. And of course, some of them have crumbled or cracked and things like that. We have fragments. Yet these old texts are telling us a very fascinating story. And these texts predate the Bible. And in some places, the Bible quotes these texts verbatim, word for word. And the texts, when they were written down, there is evidence to point to the fact that maybe, let me say, could be that these stories were even oral before they were captured and written down. So we don't know how old these stories are. We can date tablets. Yet, how long were they circulating in human civilization before they were captured on the tablets as spoken word, just like we pass things on spoken that are not actually written down. So when we look at those documents, which I would say the book of Enoch also stems from that same strand of preserving very ancient mysteries and secrets, it says that these brothers, Enki and Enlil, actually have brothers, they had two different mothers. Enki and Enlil were the characters, that the Anunnaki visitors, that later become Cain and Abel, Esau and Jacob, God and Satan, or Satan, or the Ha-Satan. There are many ways of saying it. That one represented more of the good and one represented more of the evil. So Enlil was one of these kind of destroyers, like, well, just kill all the humans. The people who created them, we can make some more.
Well, there's some descendants still around.
Yes. Yes.
Still talking that Enlil kind of talk, just collateral damage,
Less than the herd. Less than the herd. And then we had Enki, who was very much, connected to humans, committed to humans. He was the one that told the Noah character of the Bible, also known as Ziatsudra, also known as Utnapishtim, also known as Atrahasis. It was known by different names. The Noah character, he was the one who told the Noah character, hey, the gods are planning on wiping you out. They called them gods because they wanted worship and servitude. They were not gods. They were beings that were advanced. They were not gods.
Wow.
And you are your only God. Yeah. There's no gods in the sky. And there's no gods coming to save people. And there's no God to pray to. There is the infinite all, the consciousness. I'm not an atheist. That is what we all emerge from, that infinite field, that infinite, all-knowing, all-wise, all-powerful isness, the source from where we all came. So I'm not an atheist. I just know that these beings that set themselves up to be God are not gods. And these are the beings that are named throughout the Bible. When you read El Elyon, when you read El Shaddai, these are different L's, different Elohim. The El, yes, these are not the same God. So when they're not even the same person, there's several different. And as a matter of fact, if we look at the word,
Valerie, yes, God the Redeemer, God the this, God this in the traditional Bible. So we're not having it here, because it's actually in the. Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
isn't that fascinating?
It is fascinating because the whole list of them, El, and then you said the Elohim, and then you said, so this means it's a plural. Then it's like their attributes. Of this one is. I'm sorry to.
That's right.
Yeah, it's like this one is assigned to this job, and this one is assigned to this job. So you're not the God. It's just like you're the accountant, and you're into marketing. I'm sorry to simplify it.
You're exactly right.
When you started saying El Shaddai, I was thinking of the El Roy and El What and all of them. You can't go on.
You're absolutely right. And Mauro Bellino said that in his translating of the Hebrew Bible, he is a translator of the Hebrew Bible who worked for a Vatican-approved press. And what they were making were interlinear Bibles, which an interlinear Bible is really, really, really a whole different ballgame, because it's showing you the exact wording, line for line, word for word, of the original Hebrew. And then it's giving you a translation, yet it has to go into the root meaning of the words so it's giving you a transliteration, not a translation so much. So it's more of a
Literation.
right,
And you
the
call this
literal meaning of the word.
the Inter-Bible,
Interlinear Bible.
Interlinear Bible.
Yes.
Ooh.
And there is one that people can read. Everyone can read it. It's online free. And it's called Scripture for the number 4 all.org.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you can see the example of an interlinear Bible. Now, why is that important? Because you asked an excellent question. Like, why do we even need to care about these ancient books? Why is this even? This is important because these are the things that people have been using to control humanity for millennia.
Mm-hmm.
Humanity has been controlled by religion for millennia. And now humanity is waking up to our true essential nature. Well, when you look at the transliteration of these words, and then you can translate it into English, the actual literal word. So if we see Elohim, it actually means mighty ones or powerful ones, and it is always plural. And it is plural masculine. It is always plural.
And
So it
always
cannot mean
masculine.
God.
Okay,
Yeah,
interesting.
it cannot mean God. Now, this is the original Hebrew Bible. So the original Hebrew Bible is telling us Elohim. That's what it says in the original Hebrew Bible. Well, what happened in the 6th century BCE is that there was a redaction of the Bible. Now, Mauro Molino says if you look at the original Hebrew, he said he was able to locate about 20 different Elohim in the original Hebrew Bible. 20 different ones. El Shaddai. El Shaddai does not mean Almighty, as the later redactors translated it to mean. It means the El of the steppe, or the El of the mountain, or the El of the open plains. There's a variation in how you could. It does not mean Almighty. It has nothing to do with Almighty. It does not mean Almighty at all. El Elyon, Most High, does not mean Most High. It means the El who is higher than the others. Could be a boss, could be someone that was just higher in the sky, because they had a spaceport and they had fiery chariots, such as in Enoch. Yeah. Elijah also ascended on a fiery chariot. And Ezekiel also saw their fiery chariot. These are all, yes, ships.
You brought up Ezekiel. Now we're gonna talk about Ezekiel, because the book of Ezekiel. If you don't want to go into the Apocrypha and the Gnostic, just read the book of Ezekiel. That book will just make you go like, because Ezekiel, the prophet, Ezekiel was prophesying, right? Yes. It was more prophetic stuff, and he was saying a whole lot of stuff as well.
Yes, and there was an alien abduction. Ezekiel went on the fiery chariot with him, and he was never seen again. Well, the Bible says it. They said that they were by the water, and that the chariot came. Doesn't it say it in the Bible?
It does. He was abducted.
But the redactors, when they went back and switched all this, they said, well, let's make everything God. And let's make everything one God, Yahweh. Mm-hmm. So now some things are translated Lord. That's the same one. Some things are translated, Adonai is translated Lord. El Elyon, Elohim. That's why you want to do what Mauro Molino said. You want a naked Bible. You want to see, before the redactors came and scrubbed it all up and made it all one God, because these were Yahwehs. Yahwism was a cult, and they believed in Yahweh. Yet they didn't only believe in Yahweh, because no one in the ancient world, I don't think, was a strict monotheist. Monotheism is a somewhat new phenomenon, and it's true and it's not true. So what I mean by it is, it's true that there's one big source, right? There's one infinite consciousness. That part is true. The other part that is a little tricky is that then people go about to try to kill other people's gods, when we don't need to do that, because this infinite source can show up as anybody and anything. It's showing up as you and me right now. It could show up as, I don't know, an Orisha. It could show up as Yemaya. It could show up as it has no limits on how it can appear to people and how it can show up and communicate has no limits. So the experiences that people have of, oh, it looks like an angel, or it looks like whatever is in your consciousness. That's what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not objective. Consciousness is not objective. We can't say, oh, there's consciousness right there. Consciousness
Like
is
what
appearing
is
to
in your consciousness?
according to what's in your consciousness. So if you believe in angels, you'll see angels. Yet if you grew up in maybe a Mayan culture that doesn't believe in angels, yet they believe in the feathered serpent, Kukulkan, or they believe in whatever is in their consciousness, that's how they will connect with the divine. And who's to say what's more valid and what's not? There is no more valid than anything else.
You know, Valerie, this explains the artwork.
Ah,
This explains the artwork because when you look at, and we just had a conversation with one of the smart sisters, it's going to go up soon, and we were talking about this. We talked about the artwork and how the angels depict themselves. This is so in alignment. I can't believe this. Now, I was saying that in some cultures, the angels, I have this book about mythology, and it shows different cultures. They look weird, like something you don't want to show up in your right. Don't show up in my realm. But now you have hit the nail on the head. In this culture, in this reality, in this consciousness, this is okay. This is their culture. It's not a bad, ugly thing. You know, it's just, you know, like if you look at the Aztec art or the West African arts or the, you know, the Celtic art, this is what, yeah, it shows up based on your consciousness. It shows up based on your culture. So now when somebody in the West is looking at somebody else's culture, they might call it evil. But it's not. Oh, I don't want to say it's not. I know people are gonna bite my head off for saying this. You don't know, but I get it now because I understand the artwork. I understand the museum work. I understand the sculptures now. They were depicting what was in their consciousness based on their culture, traditions, belief system.
yes. And what's it makes sense, doesn't it? It adds up, which is why it's good for us to be in love and not judgment, because love cannot judge. So if we're in love and we're visiting the Aztecs or the Inca, I've been to Peru several times, and there you see a lot of the Incan civilization. I've been to India, and there you see a very different kind of depiction. One thing they all have in common: they all have stories of the people that descended from the heavens and came to earth.
Yeah.
Taught the earthlings things, had a hand in the formulation of earthlings. They all have that story. Star people stories.
Yeah, the Dogon in Mali, the star. But you know what, Valerie, you touched on this a little bit. Okay, but you know, maybe you can go a little bit deeper into this. The book of Enoch, they talk about the Nephilim, and when you're talking about the people coming, they also talk about the mermaids. And in West Africa, because you mentioned the sky, in West Africa, especially Nigeria and those parts, they talk about the people who come from the water. So there's other cultures talking about the star people, and then there's other cultures talking about the water people. And then in the Nordics here, you know, in Copenhagen, Denmark here, one of the famous tourist sites is the Little Mermaid, right? Because they have stories of the people who come from the water as well.
That's right.
I don't know if you have found any ancient texts talking about this, because I know the book of Enoch talks about the mermaids.
Yes.
The water beings. I don't know if you know if you have any more information on this.
The Bible talks about them too. And the Bible talks about sea monsters and all of that, the book of Job, and I believe also Psalms. Here is something very Psalms. Here's something very fascinating. We have explored space more than we have explored the waters on this planet. We don't know what's living down there.
Yeah.
We don't know. We sail on top of it and we'll go so deep. We don't know what's in our own waters. To this day, we don't know what's in our own waters, because it's not easy, of course, to create something that can go that deep into the sea. and see everything that's down there. We can only go but so deep. Right? So we don't know what's in the waters. And I will tell you this, sailors all say, people that do deep sea fishing way out there in the ocean, they say that they have seen so many things on the ocean that you cannot explain with our current knowledge, including sirens, mer people, people that are of the sea. So we know that this is real. We know this is real. The other reference that we have to it in the Bible, in the book of Enoch, is that when they came, some were in transporting back and forth spaceports, and Enki, Lord of the Waters, went to the Absu, known as Africa, South Africa. Yes, and was in that whole region in South Africa. And he was Lord of the Waters. So they had some kind of civilization that could live in water, and they had ships, vessels, because they came here originally mining for gold. They had ships that they could have the water sucked from a river or an ocean, move through their ships through a crystal chamber, and siphon out the gold and pour the water back into that's described in the text as well, that they could actually separate, like, a little bit of gold, like, people go panning for gold in the river and things like that. They had a crystal, they had a vessel, and it's described in the Bible. Ezekiel gave a great description of it. He said that it had 4 wheels, and he said it was omnidirectional. He said it was a wheel within a wheel. Why do people want to make this whole thing spiritual? It's not spiritual. Later on, they came, oh, he was having a vision. Oh, this is the mystical vision of God's chariot. Oh, this is all about Yahweh. This is about God. Oh, we need to be in awe of something outside of ourselves. No, it's technology. It's actually what it says. It's a flying chariot with fire. That's what the Bible says. If we're reading it, are we reading it?
Yeah, we're reading it.
I couldn't believe it. Yeah, because when humans see something that is beyond our technological grasp, we make it mystical. We make it something.
Why do we do that? Or reject the information without digging deeper. I find this to be the most. Talk about this, because I think it's important. So I see 2 things happening. So there are, you're born in a country, you're born in a family, like you mentioned at the beginning, the family you were born in, and you are in the kingdom, right? It's what you're taught, but you were curious, you went down and you just went all the way and figure out a whole lot of stuff, right? But let's talk about the norm. Like, most people are born in a certain family, that's what they know. And they say, this is my religion, this is my culture, I was born in this country, this is our tradition, women do this, men do this. This is what they know, they stay there. And then there is the other side that I find to be quite interesting, where they say, she's wrong, but I can understand this part. You are who you were born and raised to be, but I can't understand this part of you judging what you have not taken time to learn about, to research, to study. I can't understand that part. That's the part that I unapologetically call ignorance, because I think it's a choice, and then you have the evidence of what they actually believe, which is in the Bible that they read, and they go to church every Sunday, and it's there, but they will say, we don't know what she's talking. Why is this happening? Do you know why this is so strong in the psyche of the human being?
According to some of the information that has come down to us from the Anunnaki, that they actually flipped a worship gene, call it sort of like a worship gene inside of humans, because they wanted them, they created us to be a worker race for them, to work for them. That's why they even came up with hybridizing to create humans in the first place. And I don't say create because they didn't create anything, just like if you are growing roses, and you put two kinds of roses together and you get this third kind of rose. Well, we didn't create the first rose, and we didn't create the second rose, and we didn't create the third rose. We knew the science of genetics and biology.
Hybridize it.
That's exactly right. It's hybrid, right?
Mm.
So they say that being that they did a little bit of tampering, quite a bit of tampering with the genome, and that there is actually somewhat, we could call it either it's metaphysical, metaphorical, or it's actual. I have to do more research on this. There's sort of like a worship gene. And if you have your worship gene turned off, you don't worship things outside of yourself. If it's turned on, you're looking for things to worship. You're looking for things to put your faith in. They're looking for some solidity in a very swift changing world that we don't always understand. I mean, things happen, and sometimes they happen seemingly randomly. I don't believe that there's anything random in this entire universe. I think everything has a reason, right, for it occurring.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Everything has a purpose, whether I understand it in the moment or not, whether I like it or not, it still has a reason for being. So there are people who are determined to not be powerful, to give away all their power to a God in the sky, a preacher, a pastor, a teacher, an authority figure, so as not to take 100% responsibility for self and be a sovereign being and make powerful choices, not from the lower egoic mind, from the higher wisdom and higher intelligence. And most of us, it takes us a long time to even tap into the higher wisdom and intelligence because it requires so much meditation, quieting the mind. It's a discipline, it's a discipline. So we were born perfect. And then with all the conditioning in those first 7 years, we get pretty raunchy, some of us more than others. And then it's really, like the Gnostics say, it's about finding that inner light and coming to the understanding of who you really are.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense because I could never figure it out. I'm like, but you see, then there are people like you who are just like.
Well, it took me a long time too. It took me years. Yeah. And it was a gradual process.
Yeah, it's gradual. Yeah. I don't know what it is. Okay. So it's a gene. It's on or it's off or it's somewhere in between.
Yes. And it could be that we determine it ourselves. That we determine, I'm too afraid of this big, crazy, scary world. This big, crazy, scary world doesn't make sense to me. I go to a church. They're playing great music. They got lasers going. These big mega churches in the United States. They got lasers going. Everybody's hugging you. The people in the lobby are super cheerful. It's 1,000 people at church. Yeah, that's how they reel you in, baby. They got to reel you in because they got to get some time out of every paycheck. 10% out of every paycheck. They hook them up to it. Yeah, I call it vampirism because they hook you up to an automatic debit on your payday for 10% to come out according to your paychecks. And you need to bring your paychecks in and you need to confirm what your income is. Because then...
But that too is not in the Bible.
It's nowhere in the Bible.
This is why it's so important. I think this conversation, Valerie, it is so important. You must read the book that you are, if you want it to rule your life, if you use this book as your guide, read it. There's nowhere that it says 10% of your paycheck should be given. And in the context, talk about this. In the context, it was when the priests lived as monks or monasteries, and it was to buy them some food. And, it was such a different bulk. Please talk about this a little bit. I think somebody has to hear this. It's so important.
It really is.
And all the pastors in the Bible, they had jobs, they had skills. One was a carpenter, they all had a talent, a skill, a job. So they were not living off of the monks. They had a skill. Go for it. It's so annoying for me. I get so.
And it's working. People are going for it. People are going for it, the people fall for it. And in the Bible, what they have, once again, a bastardization of something that made very good sense thousands of years ago. If a person was working at a temple and they were a dedicated priest at a temple or a dedicated priestess at the temple, of course people brought food to the temple. They would pick, not only would they not pick all of their food, so let's say you had an apple orchard, you were to leave the edges, a few apples on the edges for passersby. You know how Jesus would be walking, he would just pick some figs off the tree as they were walking. You were supposed to leave some on the edges of your land for people, poor people, widows like Ruth and Naomi. They were gleaning, they would take their baskets and they would go after the harvest, right? So the harvest would go in, but they didn't harvest everything. They would harvest most of it, yet you were supposed to leave the edges for those who were poor, didn't have land, widows, orphans. It was a social mechanism to take care of everyone. And travelers, people traveling by, they can just pick apples, because I think there's an inherent understanding that we don't own this stuff anyway. We're here to use it while we're here. These when I'm in Italy and I see those grapevines and those olive trees, they've been there, some of them hundreds of years, some of these olive trees. And so and then once you would harvest, you would take your first fruits. So you bring in all these, dates, olives, things like that, and wheat, all these things. And you bring it to the priests who didn't have land. According to the story of the Bible, the 12 tribes of Israel, the Levite tribe, who continues to this day, according to some people say they continue to this day. And if you know Jewish people by the name of Kohen, then they are of that tribe because they were Kohans, right? So Kohean, and it morphed to Kohen. So if you know any Jewish people named Kohen, they probably are that lineage of the Levites. And the Levites didn't have land, right? They were not apportioned land in the Bible story. And so because they didn't have land, they were at the temple, they couldn't grow crops. How are they going to sustain themselves? They sustained themselves because the people would bring nuts and dates and seeds and olives and so forth and so on that the people themselves had grown on their own land. Well, that, by the usurpers, got bastardized into, give me 10% of every dollar you make. And it's nowhere in the Bible.
No.
But the people that live by that will tell you, you can't do this, that, or the other because it's not in the Bible, or live by the Bible, where the church routinely does things that are not in the Bible and doesn't do things that are in the Bible.
Yeah. And you said something also which is really interesting. You mentioned the gods, and in plural. And we know that the Christian pantheon, because they believe, I say believe when, there's no 100% knowing. So they believe that their God is the one and only God. But you have been talking in plural, and you mentioned Yahweh, you mentioned Jehovah, you mentioned someone else, I forgot, but you mentioned 3 different, gods that I know. Certain churches will go by this specific one. Like they will say, we just pray to Yahweh, we just pray to Jehovah, we just pray to Yahshua, Yahshua, Yamashiach. I know specific churches have their name that they believe is their name. Do you know the differences between these gods?
Yes.
Because, are they one and the same, or are they different? I don't know. I just go,
They're different beings, yet what I always like to do is go back to the origin story. Because in the origin story, it's so rich with information that we can tap. So the origin story tells us that Enlil was more of a warring kind of person. He was a great administrator, and Enlil was more of a kill the humans. We can kill them. He's not above genocide. Okay. And even even if they were not planning a genocide or a
Mm.
destruction of some kind, like a nuclear bomb detonating warheads and things like that, even if they weren't doing something like that, he was okay with sending some kind of like a pestilence kind of sort of like a chemtrail, something that would poison the land so that they would not eat and they'd just starve. And, it had stories of people just, dying of all kinds of things. That was Enlil. So Enlil morphs into later on Yahweh. Yahweh is somewhat new because Yahweh was not found on anything probably until I think about 1000 or 1500 BCE. Before then, you can't find Yahweh anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So Yahweh is a somewhat newcomer. And when we did find Yahweh, he was a lesser god in the Canaanite pantheon. The Canaanite pantheon had El, that there was El. Once again, that's a reiteration of the Anunnaki. El. It also had Baal. Baal was the sort of like the chief god. Baal was sort of this fatherly god, very wonderful and kind, sort of the God Jesus was talking about. And
Bell, you spell that, Bell?
Baal, Baal, Baal. The because in the Bible, the Yahwists and the Baal worshippers are going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
You're going to have to come back for that one alone.
That's a whole other conversation.
Oh my goodness. I was like, I don't know who she's going to spell right now. When you said Baal, I was like, whoa. Okay, yep. Go on.
and Jezebel was a priestess, and they hate Jezebel because she was a self-initiating woman, right? Mm. And so usually the god that you were a priest or priestess to, or a king or queen of, was in your name. So Jezebel. So Baal was in her name.
Oh.
Right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the same thing with Amenhotep. Amen, right? Amenhotep, the king. They didn't call them kings in Egypt. The pharaoh in Egypt. Amenhotep. Same with Tutankhamun. His name is Tutankhamun. Which I found out when I went to Egypt. I've been there a couple of times. His name, we say King Tut, or we say Tutankhamun.
Yeah.
But his name is actually Tutankhamun, and Amun is the god that they were worshiping, right? Yet, if you trace these gods back, they all correspond to specific Anunnaki.
And this Amun is what some ancient texts say translates over time into Amen.
That's right. That's exactly right. And it's one big, wonderful, fascinating story that the Bible is telling us. And so we cannot blame the Bible. People said to me, how can you be a Christian, which the Bible just, God says in the Bible? People automatically think that the Bible is God's word when it's not. They automatically think that. God didn't write the Bible. God didn't inspire people to write the Bible. We don't know who wrote the Bible. None of the books that we have with the Bible were originally named that. They didn't have names. They were circulating scrolls. We put names on them later. So this book, I have a Bible collection. This book that is the Bible, it has gone through iteration of redacting and naming and collating and curating it to get this 66 book that we have today. And I think that's a fascinating story. Like, what is this book saying?
And the obvious thing that anyone questioning this should ask, if you speak other languages, it's impossible to translate the text one to one. Many words do not exist in one language. You would have to create a word close to or similar to. Some languages have one word that means one thing, and the word is an explanation. So when you speak other languages, for a fact, it's impossible. I can't translate Danish into German or English or German into English or Swahili into English. The words do not exist. Like in the Swahili language, there are no words like stupid or idiot, or they don't exist. You have to really describe how you feel about somebody. You
Wow.
know, yeah, yeah. It doesn't, it cannot. And so for me, it's just, and but the first time I read the Bible in German, even the first book is not called Genesis, it's called the first Moses.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
it was first Moses, second Moses, and I was like, what is, first I was so confused because I was like, what is going on here? You cannot translate it, so it makes so much sense.
Hmm.
it, in case somebody is listening and thinking, oh, how are the translations? Even today, if you took the Bible in English and translated it in another language, it would be totally different. Just simple, like totally different. So what Valerie said is so obvious, like when you speak different language. It's so obvious. And you know the way you said the name, we just say King Tut, like you said, and then a lot is missed out in the lesson, in the learning, because you see, I didn't know all that. I also just know when you go to the museums, they just say King Tut. And then in the little fine print, they put all the different things. And who really looks at that? You know, so you're in a rush. Like you have to go to the whole museums. You're not reading all that fine print all the time. So
Yes.
yeah, I didn't know it was the way you said it. Like,
And what's fascinating about all of this is right in front of us, yet
mm,
I don't think we can see it until we're ready. Because when I used to hear people talk about the Anunnaki, I used to say, conspiracy theorists. That's what I used to think. But it kept coming up. It was like the universe is showing me something. Look at this. And I said, okay, let me delve deeply into this.
mm,
Shocking. Shocking. And we don't just have the evidence from the Bible. We have
mm,
we have corroborating evidence from many, many sources. So one source that we have corroborating archaeological discovery,
mm,
all of these ancient cities, these major
mm,
cities that they were using as their home base. We have evidence in our own genome that
mm.
200,000 years ago, humans took an evolutionary leap that literally should have taken millions of years. That's
Billions,
millions,
millions. Mm.
millions of years. The evolutionary biologists are saying to us that humans had an extraordinary leap about 200,000 years ago, which corresponds to the time frame of when the Anunnaki were here and when they did these experiments. 200,000 years ago, and how they started to do these experiments was that they had a worker race called the Igigi. It was they called them lesser gods, and they worked hard, 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 and they could not get all the gold they wanted from where they were in Sumer. So that's why Enki came to Africa, South Africa, and there's a book called The Ancient Temples of the Anunnaki. And it talks about all the gold mines of Enki that are in, because of course Africa is rich with resources, right? Ghana, South Africa, all of it is so rich with resources. So they were able to,
Congo. Ooh,
uh-huh, yes. So they were,
Congo. Mm.
yes, all over. And it was more gold than they could have imagined whatsoever.
Mm.
So they were the first colonizers, I guess you could say. They were star traveler colonizers. And so these Igigi lesser gods were it was backbreaking labor that they were doing, they said, for over 200,000 years, for thousands of years. Because these beings lived for a very, 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 very long time. And they lived for thousands of years. And so they had an uprising. They revolted, they rebelled. They said, we're not going to do all this hard, back-breaking work. Our children are doing the back. It was just back-breaking work, no end in sight. And sure enough, they had a sky council. And the Bible does talk about the sky council in Psalm, I think it's 84, verse 1. They talk about the council of gods. And in the Sky Council, they said, well, what can we do? How can we replace this workforce? How can we get some kind of being that could do the work for us down here? And one of them said, well, I've seen it. I've seen it running around in the Apsu. They saw a bipedal hominid they saw them walking around in Africa, where the first beings were. Everyone knows the first humans, first beings that stood erect. The first Homo erectus is from Africa. They saw them and they began to capture them. They said, we've seen them. And they said, and they're walking around and they have families and whatnot. But we don't think that they can do the work for us that we need done, because we don't know if we can teach them to use tools and if we can get them to follow all the instructions like we need them to. So we might have to do some modification of their DNA. And they went and trapped many of them. They were in cages. And that's when they started to conduct their genetic experiments in a garden-like place. It was an outdoor laboratory called the Eden, Edin, which is in the Bible, the Garden of Eden. The Bible is all right in the Bible. It's telling us what happened. And the first one they created was the Adamu, or the Adapa. That's what they called it, the Adamu. And they call all the children of the Adamu Adamites. That's what they called them. They called them Adamites. And when they made the first few, it didn't work because, they couldn't get the connection quite right? It didn't work. And because they would come out deformed or this, that, or the other. And they kept experimenting. And then one day they said, hey, maybe we need to sacrifice one of our own, get the blood, get his DNA material of the blood, and mix it also with some kind of clay mixture from the earth, since these beings are from earth. They figured it out and they made a match and it worked. They made an atom and they inseminated the atom, the egg. They were doing in vitro fertilization. And they inseminated it into an Anunnaki woman. Nin Herzog had 6 birth wives, they called them. She had surrogates. It was surrogacy. And none of this sounds strange because we do all of this. You can even order a designer baby at this point. You can order a baby with certain colors and so forth, right? So the surrogate mothers, they were able to birth the babies and the babies were just fine. And at first they could not reproduce. And Enki went in and made further adjustments so that they could reproduce, because usually hybrids can't reproduce, right? So he made further adjustments to the DNA, to the genome, and they got the woman. The man was just out there, the Adamu. He was already created and they were creating more. But then when they got the woman and they made it so that they could mate and reproduce, he was blown away like, wow, this is like me, because everything else he saw wasn't like him. That's why he's screaming in the Bible, like, oh, this one is like me. Oh my goodness. What? You're like me. Because the ones that were running around, the Homo erectus, they were hairy, right? The ones that were the Anunnaki, they were smooth skinned. Some of them couldn't even go in the sun very much. They had to wear sunshades because their planet is very far from the sun. So they were, experiencing changes, atmospheric changes on their body for being in a different atmosphere than their home planet. And so sure enough, he saw her and he was just so happy. And then they had children and they were breeding them. They had more than one Adam and more than one Eve. Because you don't have a gene pool diverse enough to create, billions of people, what we have now from 2 people. You would need at least, they say 10,000 people to have a diverse enough gene pool to create 8 billion people. 8 billion people can't come from 2 people. That's genetics. That's science. Because the 2 people are going to have 2 kids or 3 kids or 4 kids. And then the sister's going to marry the brother and they're going to have kids. And they keep reproducing. And by the 5th or 6th generation, they're all going to either be mentally unstable. They're going to have limbs they're going to start coming out with malformations is what's going to happen as the gene pool degrades. And we know this because we know science. So we know it couldn't have been a man and a woman, 2 people that made all these people. It could not have happened. And the Bible told you, the Bible never said Adam and Eve were the only people on the planet. The Bible said,
it did not say.
It doesn't say that. The Bible says it was the Elohim, and then that they created, they made it Adam and they made it Eve. They put them together. And then they say that Cain and Abel were made, right? They had Cain and Abel. And then that Cain, when he got, about to be banished, He was afraid of the people.
Yes.
If they see me, they might kill me. What people? It's only supposed to be you, your mama, your daddy, and your brother, and you just killed your brother. It's only supposed to be 3 humans on the entire planet. But that's not what the Bible says, but that's what church says.
That's what church says. That's not what
That's what church says. The Bible does not say that. The Bible tells you there were other people. The Bible tells you there were the Elohim. The Bible even tells you originally, in the original Hebrew Bible, that Adam was not Cain's father. The redactors fixed that up because they're like, we can't have it as Eve was having sex with Enki. Eve had sex with one of the beings. Okay, so, and then the Nephilim, let's just throw them into the mix, that there were, this is where Enoch comes in, the watchers. Enoch said there were 200 watchers. These were watchers watching humanity, watching over the Earth project. This was a project.
The Earth project.
Yeah, we were a project, yeah. And we were never meant to be on our own, just ruling everything. We were never meant to do that. We were made, or we were hybridized to be their workers, to do the hard labor that needed to be done to get all this gold loaded on their ships and sent back to Nibiru because they were having an ecological disaster on their planet. Their planet had volcanoes, a lot of volcanoes, and the volcanic dust would go up and help the atmosphere shield them from the sun, deep space and all of that. And the volcanoes stopped spewing. Then it affected the fertility. They were having major issues on their planet. In addition, they were having civil wars, all of that. They were having it sounded like Earth. Sound like Earth. And then that's when
I'm sitting here a little bit tongue-tied because this explains a lot of what you're looking at. It explains the system and the structures. It explains the birth certificate. It explains, because you started by saying we're sovereign beings. And you were talking about the God within and us, and then you talked about the Earth project. I'm just trying to put it all to Valerie.
Powerful, isn't it? To have
very powerful. You have said it explains the system. You know how people say the system is broken, but now you are explaining it's not broke. It's the Earth project. It was built. This was the system built like this. So what we're looking at and calling a broken system is now the questions, like you said, we're asking right now, like, hey, hold on, what the hell is going on? This is not cool, right? Because you said the human beings are waking up and they're like, hold on a minute.
And we're remembering we're self-sovereign because we are a divine creation. And even the Anunnaki said that they had to answer to the actual supreme source of the whole universe. They knew they weren't gods. They knew that there was a supreme source of the entire universe. And they knew that there was such a thing as karma, that they would have to answer for it. But it explains for me a lot of very fascinating things that I never understood about the Bible, such as why did the Israelites say, we don't want Yahweh to be our king anymore. We want a human king. Ooh. They were talking about the Anunnaki. They didn't want the Anunnaki ruling over them anymore. They wanted human kings. They wanted kings that were humans. But the Nephilim, I didn't finish that little piece right there.
Yeah.
Were the offspring of the Watchers. So Enoch calls them the Watchers. And so they could have been, they might not have been the Anunnaki themselves. They could have been the sons of the Anunnaki or the children of the Anunnaki. But they were not so much the great gods. They were more here to do work, here to oversee the Earth project. And this is now, time has gone by, because remember, they were here for hundreds of thousands of years. They were here for a very long time. And so they're looking at all these women on Earth and they're like, wow, these women, and the humanity is proliferating. And they're like, these women are hot. They look better than Anunnaki women or whatever they were accustomed to. You want some Earth. mates, maybe not the mates from where you come from, right? And sure enough, they said, we're going to go get us some wives on this. Isn't this just an epic story? Epic story. I don't know why we wouldn't just want to know our real story origins.
It's so epic, the distraction. I mean, women on Earth, this Earth, we must be kick-ass because even the celestial beings can't get enough of us. So
they wanted the women. They wanted the women, and they said, "Hey, we need to go down here and let's get some of these wives." And one was like, "Aren't we going to get in trouble because we're not supposed to be mixing with the humans like that? We're supposed to be overseeing, and that's not allowed." And they were like, "Oh no, we're doing it anyway. We don't care, and let's make a pact that we're all going to stand together if one gets in trouble." They made a pact.
We were worth it, huh?
Oh, baby. They were looking at these women like, what?
Talking about the goddess, the divine feminine.
Oh, they were looking at it irresistible.
Imagine you're a woman and you don't know your worth, and the celestials are breaking celestial laws and willing to go through karma for you. Like, come on.
Absolutely.
This is some serious stuff. Go on.
Isn't it amazing? I mean, it's and the Bible tells us about this, right? The Bible tells us about this. The book of Enoch tells us about this. So the watchers, they came on down and they started, mingling with the women. Now in the Bible, the redactors went back and made it all spiritual. These are angels, and now they're fallen angels, and now they're demons. No, they were extraterrestrials. They were extraterrestrials, and so they were, of course, of a different kind. And so they came down, they made it with women. And by now they had the gene pool thing figured out because our genetics and their genetics are very similar. Very similar. And sure enough, when the women got pregnant, the babies were monstrous. Some of them died in childbirth because the babies were so huge. Because this was, once again, mating a female woman with a being from another star system, right? An extraterrestrial. And sure enough, we know the story. The babies grew to be huge. They were giants. They say like 30 feet tall. They were huge.
Ooh.
Many cultures have giant stories. The stories of
Titan stories, right? The story of the Titans. Mm-hmm.
That's exactly right. Of when the giants walked the planet. And sure enough, now things are just crazy. The big gods are like, the big dudes, the Anunnakis that are in charge. Are like, oh wow, confetti.
I don't know how you did that, but it's beautiful.
My thing does this all the time.
I love it. Yeah,
it's really funny. It's really funny.
I love it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when the babies were born and they grew up and they were so big, they were eating human flesh, they were drinking human blood, they were out of control. And it says it in the Bible how they were lawless. They could not be controlled. It was just out of control. And so sure enough, the Anunnaki decided we have to have some kind of extinction event to kill these kids of these. First of all, we need to deal with these 200 watchers that should have never left. Go down here to these women. They should have stayed in their space stations watching over the planet like we told them to, right? I know. I wouldn't blame anyone if they're listening to me. And
this is the best Bible study ever.
People are asking me.
I'm going to have to add this into a Bible study playlist because this is like some real Bible study. It is so cool. It's riveting.
Isn't it shocking?
It's shockingly riveting.
Isn't it? And people have been asking me, please do a Bible study. Please do like the esoteric ancient secrets Bible.
It's wild. But again, you're giving these references and anyone who's read the Bible, like for real, read it. Not your pastor read it for you and told you what was in it. But if you've read it, what you're saying is like a deja vu. Like, oh yeah, that's what it was, But go on. So they were told.
And so they had an extinction level event and they wiped out the giants. Yet what was very fascinating is that the Nephilim, the watchers, the ones that Enoch calls them, and the Bible calls them fallen angels, but that's a later iteration. Later on, they say they were fallen angels. that they taught the women makeup, they taught the women dyes, they taught the
Mm-hmm.
women magic, sorcery, they taught the women herbology, how to heal with plants. And the big gods got mad. You giving all our secrets to these women.
Oh,
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
now the dots are connecting. Why the woman is like omitted? She was removed.
Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
So they were teaching the women quite a few things. And it was forbidden for humanity because, once again, humanity wasn't created for all this. You all were created just to go and get our gold for us and be our servants. You're not supposed to be doing all this other stuff. And sure enough, it blossomed and blossomed and blossomed far beyond what they could have ever imagined. And now here we are, 8 billion of us.
Ooh. And all this residue of the knowledge that we have now, we call it ancient knowledge of herbs, and we had the women who were lynched, because they were apparently witches, but they were just women who knew about the earth. You know what I mean? So this is quite interesting when you start to really connect the dots.
Yes.
And they were called the fallen angels, but they were the watchers. They always, they were, so everything bad was attached to them.
Yes.
You rarely find well, we know that you've read the missing books and the ancient other texts, but they shared a lot of wisdom and knowledge, but they mostly focus on how bad they were the fallen, and
Because the redactors who went back and changed these things in the 6th century BCE when they were in Babylonian captivity, the Yahwist, these were some extremist people, and these were their books, these were their holy books. It was not a Bible yet as we know it,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
There were
yeah.
scrolls circulating, so they
Oh, yeah.
just took to changing the scrolls and making them a little more amenable to Yahwism. Like Yahweh is the God, and that's who. And so it just it helps me to understand that I don't understand, and I need to go find out.
Totally. And also when you were talking about the whole the beginning of the when you started right from upright beings, Homo erectus, and in Africa somewhere where they saw this hominid and training, all that. It took me back to what we learned back in the day about. Now I know they found other ancient fossils and remains in Ethiopia, but before that, for the longest time, the oldest one was found in Kenya.
Oh,
In
was
the
that Lucy? Or was
Lucy was later on found in Ethiopia.
oh,
Somewhere in
Ethiopia? Okay.
Ethiopia. But before Lucy was found, there was one who was found by a guy called Philip Leakey in the Rift Valley
Oh,
of Kenya. And if you've gone to the Rift Valley of Kenya,
yes, I went to the Rift Valley.
you've
Wow.
seen what it looks like. It looks like what's going on there, right? With the Mount Kenya. So when you were talking about all that, Mount Kenya, if you talk to the tribes of the Mount Kenya region and the Rift region and a lot of regions in Kenya, they actually describe it as an Eden.
They described the what?
They describe those areas, certain areas in Kenya, like they would like the Eden. Like,
That's right.
I don't want to go too much into it because
Understood.
yeah. But when you were talking about that, I was thinking about, this is interesting. And South Africa, it's interesting. Also, you mentioned South Africa because South Africa has a lot of sacred mountains that
Yes.
nobody knows what's going on there, but they believe it has a lot of extraterrestrial activity.
Yes.
And
Yes.
Zimbabwe. So
Yes.
I don't know
And
what
some abductions too, likely. And they
abductions.
abductions, maybe abducting people, things like that. I've heard a story. I think she was from Ghana, of a person. She was a young lady. She had been abducted, and 7 years later, she came back, and they had taken her in the water. These were the water people, and were breeding her and then eventually let her go.
Wow.
7 years
And
later.
these stories are very common in Nigeria of the water. A lot of
The
women disappearing in the water, and they say that they go to cities underwater.
Yes, that's
And
right.
they
That's what it
describe
said.
it when they are asked to describe it. They describe something like what was that?
Atlantis,
No, like the movie, the sci-fi movie, like
Star Wars,
no,
kind of.
with the guy, no, the guy with the fish,
Oh,
Aquaman.
oh, Aquaman. Yes, yes,
They describe these kind of that they're different cities, and it's like a
yes.
whole world under there.
A whole world, and we would never find it because we're not even going that deep. We haven't explored the oceans on this planet, so we would never find it.
Valerie, you are a brilliant, brilliant woman with a wealth of knowledge. You've opened so many boxes, you know. I love it, and I don't know, it's just fascinating, and it's amazing how much knowledge you have, and how diverse it is, and how it connects to you've taken it's knowledge from the Bible, but then we can see the manifestation in the real world. Like you can actually pinpoint Mexico and real physical structures that are depicted in these books from different cultures. That's what I find so uniquely interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. And we could talk forever, but
I
before we head
know.
out, I want us to spend the rest of maybe 10-15 minutes talking about your retreats. See, when people talk about retreats, I always get the sense that it offers kind of like a unique blend of different things, like workshops. Some are doing workshops, some are doing ceremonies, some are doing you know I don't know, reflections. It's different stuff, and I know you do retreats, and before you came on, actually you were tied up with a on a retreat, right? So just tell us a little bit. If you want to talk about that one, you can go ahead and share how that went, what it was all about, and maybe other retreats that you're preparing to.
Oh, well, thank you so much. So,
Mhm.
yes, I lead retreats for really powerful women, powerful visionary women. They are leaders, coaches, business owners. They are a lot of corporate women. I seem to attract a lot of attorneys and doctors, which is very interesting. And
Oh,
yeah, which is
very
really
interesting.
interesting. That has been a continuing, and educators as well, professors, teachers. And
Mm.
so we go around the world and we go to what I call energetically charged hotspots. And we examine the area itself. If we're in Peru or we're in Dubai or we're in Bali, we'll be going to Bali again in August for the Lionsgate. And so we'll be going to Thailand again. So we go to these places around the world to deepen our understanding of the ancient mysteries in our mystery school, and to also experience profound, rapid transformation. And the reason that I say that is because when you travel out of your norm and you get on a plane, you are in unknown territory. And the transformation is rapid because the second we embark on a journey, the subconscious mind knows, oh, wait a minute, everything's changing now. What's happening? So you experience an instantaneous transformation when you leave your usual environment where we're so comfortable and we're like as snug as a bug in a rug, as my grandmother used to say, right? And now we're in this new world, new food, new languages, new money,
Mhm.
new people. And I have found that with the processes that we have in our retreats of rituals, we do rituals on the red rocks of Sedona at night under the full moon. We do
Mhm.
cosmic alignments. We'll be in Bali on the Lion's Gate. We also have powerful, powerful, powerful community. So many of our retreat attendees come over and over, and then we always have new retreat attendees coming as well. And our retreats are a blend of spirituality and fun. So some
Mm.
retreats, yeah, you'll just be like in a maybe a yoga, like an ashram the entire time. We don't do that. We like to run around. We like to see things. We like to eat great food. We like to shop. We like to experience the people and the culture. We like to immerse in where we are. So when we're in Greece, we're immersed in Athens. We're going to the Greek islands and we're island hopping and we're eating the food and we're having new, vibrant, rich consciousness expanding experiences as we study the ancient mysteries. And usually we like to do it in luxury. We like to be in a very nice place. We don't like hard beds. You know, I don't have anything against ashrams. I've been in many retreat centers in my life. And I can certainly sleep on a nice wooden bed, no problem. And just, you know, there's places like that, right? You just meditate and you sleep on this hard bed and you just drink this chicory juice instead of coffee, and you know, you eat these pea sprouts. I can appreciate that. I've done it many times. It's all good. It's all good. No harm with that. That's just not what we do. But you know.
Oh, so you not what an immersive experience.
No, that's not the immersive experience. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. We immerse. You know, we're having Lebanese food. We're in Bali. We're having. You might have vegan food. You might have vegetarian food because we have all different kinds of dietary choices of people who come with us. So you could maybe be completely vegan or vegetarian, or you're a meat eater. No judgment. Everybody is doing.
Oh, I love that. Oh my God, Valerie. You know. And no that's one thing that I notice as well. There are people who make everything into a religion.
Everything.
And they don't know, you take the fun out of it, you take the experience out of it, and it's just not, yeah, and it's good that you said that, because sometimes I think people might not want to go on retreats because there's too many rules, there's too much judgment, you know, like, I just want to do me on this day and just, you know. Yeah, so that's interesting that you said that. Yeah.
And what's nice about it is, of course, we have jam sessions where we get down to the business at hand. So perhaps we may be doing mystery school lessons that are on angelology, demonology, or we may be we have really enthralling topics that we go over in our classes and jam sessions and workshops. So it's always going to be super, super, super instructional. We love that because I'm a teacher by nature. And then we have a lot of fun, and we play music and we dance, and we have fun. We have fun. We enjoy ourselves, and we go all over the world. So we'll be going to Bali and Thailand in the summertime for the Lion's Gate, and after Bali, we'll be hopping over to Thailand. In October, for my birthday, we'll be in Salem, Massachusetts, which we love doing events in Salem, Massachusetts. That's like a witch capital. Yeah. Salem. And then in November, we'll be in Sedona, and that Sedona retreat is going to be on 11/11. And that is going to be tapping into the 11/11 energies with a live ritual and vortex of Sedona at night. We love that. And it's just like, it can clear up things in the body temple just like that. It can clear up relationships. You can have an absolute epiphany about your soul purpose, and you come back and you're just changed. So we use the 4 Square of Life by Florence Scovel Shinn. She was the one who taught this in her book, The Game of Life, and how to play it. And the 4 Square of Life is wealth, health, relationships, and purpose. Your purpose, your fulfillment of the plan. So we focus on those 4 so that you have a holistic life of bliss.
That is so beautiful. Yeah. That is so beautiful. And I think that's a good place to end this. This is so amazing. I had so much fun. I'm sure our audience will be fascinated, intrigued, and
maybe a little triggered by this wild lady. I so love this.
You know what a wise lady told me? If someone doesn't make you think and challenge your thought process, you haven't learned anything.
Wow.
Yeah. Very, very wise lady. She's now passed on, but she told me one time, you know, because we'd gone for this event, and I was like, I was still like, I was stuck on one thing. I was like, I can't believe she said that. And she said, that's good. If you were nodding your head the whole time, then you paid too much.
Oh,
you're supposed to be challenged, and you're supposed to live somewhere asking questions. If you have all your answers, you've outgrown the space, is what she told me.
So true.
Yeah. So I think this is just perfect. It was so beautiful, Valerie. So I want to thank you for coming. And before we head out, I want you to have the last word. If you want to share something that we might have left out or you'd like to add, I'd like you to go ahead and share it.
I've got to say thank you so much for being so open and welcoming to this message, because this is a difficult message to hear, yet humanity is ready for the truth and ready to ascend beyond suppression and beyond fables and the stories that we've been told, that we knew kind of when we were listening to them that they didn't resonate as completely true, yet we didn't have proof, we didn't have evidence. So I'm so thankful to you and to all of your audience for even creating a platform where we can have these discussions. Because 200 or 300 years ago, we would have all been burned at the stake for even having this kind of conversation. So thank you. They would have dragged us out in chains, you know? Yeah, it's fairly recently. So thank you.
You're welcome. So, to all of our audience, we want to thank you for stopping by. This was our wonderful and brilliant smart sister, Reverend Valerie Love KAISI. Thank you, everybody. And don't forget to stop by the description section, and there you will find her bio, her links, and all her information. I dare you to click on it and see where it takes you. But I promise you, it will be so much fun. So go ahead and try it out. Until next time, goodbye. Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you.